Okay, fair number of you there. Go ahead and keep those hands up for a minute. I see some more hands are still kind of coming up. Okay, and how many of you are actually trading more for 1 to 3 points? If you can raise your hand, how many are trading 1 to 3 points? That's where you kind of wake up each day and say, that's the kind of trade I'm going through for. Okay. And how many of you will only take a trade if you feel in your heart of hearts that you're going to go ahead and go for 5 points or more? Just trying to get a feel for the kind of traders. So just have your hand up right now if you're only going for, you're only going to take a trade if you think it's going to yield 5 points or more. Okay. Well, assuming all those hands are correct. So everybody that's got their hand up right now is knowingly taking a trade with the intention that they feel it's going to go 5 points or more. Okay, well, that's a fair number of you too. Now, great, everybody, you can lower your hands. Thank you very much. What I'll say to all of you is there is no right answer on that. You can be very profitable going ahead and trading ticks if you're doing the high volume and your accuracy is high enough. If you're going for 1 to 3 points, you can clearly be very profitable. I myself, with the size I trade, 1 point, it doesn't take much to go ahead and make money, obviously. So and for you that are going for 5 points, I really commend you because you're not going to get as frequent of setups. Now in the last week or so, it didn't take much to move the market 5 points, but on a daily average range, with the market overall market move of 10 points or so, to get 5 points eked out of that and feeling confident that you're going to get that whole 5 points, that's a challenge. You really have to make sure all those trend indicators that I share with you, and like I shared with you last week, are really in your favor. So good for you. Appreciate you guys going to do that. You guys can lower your hands if you would please, or I can lower them for you. Okay. Tell you what. There. All right. So let's go ahead and go back to the questions here. Let's see. How do you determine where to place stops? Well, we've talked about stops. How many times should one attempt re-entry if stopped out? Okay, good. Good question. What you have to ask yourself is, are you being stubborn? Are you fighting the trend? And again, I used that Enron example earlier, where you're going ahead and basically on the wrong side of the trade. The overall trend is going down. The market's falling, you get stopped out after your buy. It rallies up a little bit. You sit there and start thinking, oh, now it's going up. And then it goes down. You get stopped out again. Then it goes back up a little bit. You buy again, think, okay, now third time's got to be the charm. And then it drops again. So you got to ask yourself, are you taking the trade for the right reason in the first place? Are you on the right side of the trade? So, and if you're not, then you shouldn't re-enter the trade, in my opinion, at all, if you're on the wrong side. This is where that whole, if what you expected to have happen in the market doesn't, get out, and if you're not in a trade, look to reverse it. You need to sit there and objectively say, wow, okay, well, I thought that was going up, and now I look at that thing, and what was I thinking? That thing is clearly a short now. So then the next time it rallies back up, you don't sit there and say, oh, okay, well, it's gone back up, so now I'm going to buy it. You say, wow, look at that. All the trending is coming down on me. Okay, I'm going to take this rally, and now I'm going to start selling this. So you get on the right side of the trade. So what I would say is if you're looking to re-enter the trade for the right reasons, there's not a problem with that. If that's 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, from my perspective, you got to obviously talk to your financial advisor, your risk trading plan. But from my perspective, for me, I'll re-enter a trade right away if I get to the point where I actually would get stopped out if I can't salvage a trade with a scale in, because I know that trend is so strong. If I can't fight that trend, I want to be on that opposite side with it. Okay. Let me clear that screen off real quick. How much profit before you move your stop to break even? Oh, you know what? Can I do a quick show of hands. We've got obviously a lot of these questions, to go through. I want to make sure that these questions, you're finding some of these useful. Obviously there's a lot more of them to go. Many of them are, I think, the same questions many of you are asked. Could I just get a quick show of hands? Is this helping you going through these things and looking at charts and talking about them? Could everybody raise their hands just so I make sure that we're helping you out there? And just go ahead and keep your hands raised if you would, please, guys. Okay. If everybody lower their hands real quick, or I'll lower them real quick. Okay. Okay, let me go ahead and keep the hands lowered for a second there. And my next question will be then with a show of hands. How many of you would just like to kind of abandon the question list and go into, just going into the two-bar setup and the other parts of the thing? I just want to go ahead and see if the, going through the questions is helping. Okay, so keep your hands raised if you want to just move into the setups and everything else, or the two-bar setup and the variations and such. Okay. I think what we're going to go ahead and do is kind of a 50-50 split. Todd, Robert?
Yeah, Robert. I think a couple comments I've gotten that your questions, going over the frequently asked questions is very helpful, but I think they got enough right now, and maybe want to move on to the setups and then maybe catch the rest of those questions at the end of the webinar.
Okay. All right. Well, I tell you what we'll do then. Let's go ahead and take a quick break here. It's I'm showing 11:10 Eastern time is what I've got it at. So why don't we take a quick 5-minute break for everybody, and we'll go ahead. We'll come back and we'll get into the two-bar setup strategy and everything. Actually, we're going to talk about my scaling strategy and then the two-bar strategy from there. Okay. So take a break, everybody, and we'll be right back. Wow. Well, who's got the music on? Okay. Todd, was that you? Can
No,
everybody?
that's Robert. That was a special request.
That was a special request. Wow. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure everybody's back before we get going here. Gang, can everybody raise their hand real quick if you're back? Okay, it looks like pretty much everybody's back, and the recording if they stepped away for an extra minute or two. All right, what we're going to do now is, there's a lot of questions on there, and what I'm hearing is that you guys are typing in questions, and that sounds like within a couple minutes I'm answering them through that list. That list obviously has value, which is why I kind of went through it, and tried to shake things up back and forth, try to answer some questions I know many of you have had for a very long time, and you had expressed that through your comments to me in the survey and stuff. So I was trying to get that out there for you, but I think what we'll do now is kind of switch gears back to some of the other parts, and the questions we don't get answered today, then we'll try to make an effort maybe through the chat room or something, figure out how we can answer some of those questions for people. Some of those questions I think are just going to be answered through the course of this, but we were trying to get some of them out of the way for people. So with that being said, the next thing I want to kind of talk about is the scale-in strategy before we get to the two-bar and any other setups for that matter. And I kind of mentioned it to you earlier. The way I use the scale-in strategy, let me go ahead and give you some real examples here. Get back here to like yesterday's trade, for instance. Okay, so the way I use this strategy, let me get the highlighter on, is when I'm looking to go ahead and do a trade, whether it's two-bar setup, for instance, like if we have the two-bar setup, one of the ways that I can use the scale-in strategy, how many times have we had a situation in the channel where we had such a strong move down that we actually, by the time we had the two consecutive bar break, we actually got to the next support level, okay? That happens. And so when that happens, then people are like, well, then now what do we do? Okay, and so one of the things I like to do when we've had a big move with the first two bars, at the open of the next bar. See, that's what you have to understand about the two-bar strategy. There's the conservative two-bar strategy, and then and that's why I'm kind of talking about these two things simultaneously. There's a conservative two-bar strategy, and then there's so many variations of the two-bar strategy that can be played with a scale-in strategy. So what we do is, in a case where we have two consecutive bars that are down significantly, what you can do is start to slowly scale in. Now, when you've got 6 contracts, which was about the average contracts to trade, what you can do is at the open of the third bar, so this is not a bar that's gone in and pulled back yet, because remember, you got to think, the crux of the two-bar strategy is actually the initial 2 breaks below a support level or above a resistance level. Okay, that's the first major key thing. You notice I focus on the bars, that I want the bars to be solid closing bars. I don't like them, such as in this case here, where they rally up above the 50% level only to fall all the way back down to the 50% level. Those are the kind of bars I don't like. So I focus heavily on that portion of the setup, because if we get 2 consecutive bars, and I know somebody in the channel had back tested this. Me, I'm not personally a big fan of back testing, because back testing, how many indicator packages have you seen out there that have been back tested or curve fitted to a particular time frame? So they yield these magnificent results, percentage wise, and they put that in their sales materials. But Gaydon, I believe it was, in our room, if I recall correctly, hope that's the right person, had done some back testing and found that the two-bar strategy had worked out, very well, far more times than not. So what I like to do, and that's been my observation over time, which is why I shared it. I feel, from my perspective, it's a more conservative setup. But what we do though is the third bar though a lot of times is the problem. It either goes ahead and well, I'm sorry, the second bar a lot of times is the problem. It either comes too far or sorry, there's a lot there. I'm trying to get out at the same time. There's the first two bars are an issue because of the fact that they have to meet so many requirements. They can't be more than 50% off the high. They both got to be above, in this case like here, the resistance level. And then the third bar, ideally we like that to be on a lighter volume pullback to support, but that third bar does not cooperate a lot of times. Or by the time we get to the third bar, we've already exhausted a lot of the profit opportunity. Here's an example right here where we broke down below. It didn't go too far. The second bar didn't go all the way down to here, but when we went ahead and we didn't get a whole lot of a pullback. It only pulled back to the speed line. So what I like to do with my trades, and you'll see when I'm able to actually record a couple videos, you'll see I don't necessarily wait because I don't, the conservative strategy, you got to keep in mind, that was for YouTube. That was something that's a higher probability trade, in my opinion, that we can put out on YouTube. And like I said, I've been doing those videos for 7 or 8 months, and people still ask questions. Now, was that 2 bars actually below the support, or was that 2 bars above the resistance? People still ask that very same question after 8 months of watching videos. So I'm certainly not going to put out the more aggressive strategies in such a public forum like that. But what I like to do with a 2-bar strategy at times is I'll start scaling in. If I feel I'm on the right side of the trend, I will go ahead and start scaling in right at the beginning of the third bar. Okay, so that's something I want to share with you, both my personal entry technique and also then as it relates to scaling in. So what happens here is this. So in a case like this, we go ahead and we get down below. We have 2 consecutive bars below now support, right? You go ahead, you get into this position right here. Let me get an arrow bar up here for you real quick. Okay. We go ahead and if you get in here with light volume, let's say 1 contract, if you're a 1 to 6 contract trader, what would happen in a case like this is as soon as you got into this trade, you went ahead and you had a very slight pullback, and then it immediately dropped. Okay, so you wouldn't have gone ahead and had a full size in there, but you would have gone ahead and profited from the contract that you had in there. Okay, and that's one of those strategies. There was a time I remember within the last couple of weeks where we'd had a big move down, and I told people in the channel this would be a good, this is the kind of thing I want to discuss the scale-in strategy for, because sometimes the first 2 bars do move very far, or the third bar doesn't necessarily set up as pristinely as we would like to have happen. So what I like to do with that then is scale in with small size, and then if it continues to blast right away, in fact, we didn't get to that comment because we've stopped that part short here, but in the questions section that I was reading off earlier, one of the people said, how do you handle it when many times the third bar just goes and keeps going in the direction? Well, that does happen, especially if you found yourself on the right side of the trade. That will happen, which is why I like the scale-in strategy of going ahead and put, as soon as I get the 2 consecutive bars, putting a contract in there. And then if it rolls back up to the resistance levels, like we would hope it would on a light volume, then you add more contracts as you get up to the resistance. But at least you're participating in the move, and then you can add more in if the setup goes ahead and actually works out properly, and then it goes ahead and falls, and then you make more money on more contracts. But at least you've gone ahead, once you've gotten that first 2-bar close, you've gone ahead and begun the process of participating. And you're going to go ahead and actually see some examples of that. In fact, let's go ahead and show that right now. Some of my actual trades here. Okay. Here's, I don't know why that little arrow's there. Bear with me here. Here's some examples from yesterday, starting here. These numbers, these times, I think are, what is it, Greenwich Mean Time, so I think you got to subtract 5 hours for those you that want to marry up my time and sales and kind of see what I was doing. Okay, good learning opportunity for you. Here I was only able to get 10 trades off. You see I started off with a couple of singles. Now, keep in mind, originally I was not going to go ahead and trade at all yesterday, but then I saw some opportunities, and then I started out with smaller size, and as I saw some trades that looked even better, later I added more size in different positions, okay, to give you a feel for what I was doing. But here, look, I started out. Now, again, I have the ability to trade more than 100 contracts, and I'm starting off with onesies and twosies. Okay, and then as it went up and it started coming into my area of resistance, I went ahead and added more size. Then it turned right around and dropped, as you can see, 2.25 points, and I got out of that 10 contracts. Okay, then here's the next trade. I started off going ahead and shorting at 46.25. Adding some more at 46.5, and then it turned around, dropped a point, and made this contract. This was the one right here, by the way, that I was talking about. Had you guys kind of in mind where I wanted to actually do a trade, mimicking your size and kind of demonstrating, how you can do like a 2, 2, and 2 kind of strategy. Or if you're doing 3 contracts, you can do 1, 1, and 1. There's the mix is kind of up to you. But the goal is that, from my perspective, and we'll go back to the other chart in a minute, is trying to participate when you get the 2-bar setup, going ahead and is, especially depending on how much it's moved, is start to participate, whittle away at it, and go ahead and put a contract in there, depending on the size you trade. Like I said, if you're a smaller contract, put one trader, put 1 contract in there. If you trade 10 contracts, then you can put 2 contracts in there. And if it moves all of a sudden right away in your direction, 2 points or so, well, great. Well, then you made a couple $100. And you know what? Before I continue on, I want to show you guys many more of these trades. I want to do a survey again real quick, if I can. How many of you is your daily goal? And again, nobody's going to see each other's goal but me. So don't worry. And Robert and Todd, they're not going to care. But it's important to me because just like the size that you guys trade, I want to kind of custom tailor things to you guys. How many of you trade with the goal in mind to make between let's say $250 and $500 a day? If you can go ahead and raise your hands. Okay. How many of you are trading with the daily goal? This is your risk trading plan where your daily goal is set. Let me go ahead and I'll lower everybody's hands real quick. Okay. How about $500 to $1,000 a day is your daily goal? Okay. And this isn't what you would like to make, just so you understand. This is just what your goal, what your goal is. Not we all want to make $1 million a day, but I mean, your realistic goal based on your risk trading plan. Okay, I'll lower those hands. And how many of you your risk trading plan calls for you to make $1,000 or more a day? Okay. Thanks for sharing, guys. I appreciate that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to be more appropriate. So with that being said, we'll get back to the size then that you're looking to achieve. And as you scale in, you got to keep that in mind. Then how much size you're trading. I'm speculating some of you that went ahead and had the over $1,000 mark are probably some of those same people that responded to me that you're trading more than 10 contracts or so, and so on and so forth. So the next thing I want to go and do is I want to continue on, if I may, and just kind of give you a feel again for the strategy. I'm sharing with you exactly the strategies that I use for trading, And so here was that 6 contract trade that we talked about. And then of course it dropped to here. Here, this was one of those examples where I was telling you about. I got into the trade, and what is it? 25 seconds later, the trade was over. I mean, there wasn't even a scale-in opportunity. It just went ahead and ceased and desist. Then we came in a little bit after that and found a new opportunity. And here, this was that trade I was showing you earlier, where I started going and nibbling early because I saw the potential for further move to the downside, and scaled in as it was rallying back up to the resistance. Okay, the exact same strategy I just showed you guys a little while ago in the question and answer section. Let me get this down here for you. So, and then I exited that trade, 85 contracts at 40 3/4. Okay, so the same things I was talking to you about scaling are the same things. Now here, you see, I started out with onesies based on my confidence level of that particular trade. Started at 52 1/4, 53 1/4, 54 1/2, and then I went ahead and sold it off at 52 3/4. Here, 50, just got a couple off and went and sold it off. Here, it started out at 49. Bought it up to 52 where the resistance was presenting itself to me, and I ended up dumping it at 51 1/2 on 36 contracts that particular time. So it goes on and on. You see the different sizes. Like I said, I didn't want to do much yesterday. The maximum size I did yesterday was an 85 contract trade because of the volatility that we were in. Give me other days, and we'll dump certainly a lot more than that in. So. But you see how the scale and strategy, it's the same strategy. So what I'm preaching, I'm using. Okay, and that, I think if nothing else, I want you to understand that it's a viable strategy, and it's a strategy, in my opinion, it's a viable strategy. It's a strategy that I'm using, and I'm making money with it. So, Todd, are there any questions on that, or can I just keep going?